Welcome to We Are Old, Get Over It, the podcast where we celebrate the wisdom of age and maybe a little grumbling too. Okay, so I'm ready to start.
Okay.
If you're ready to start.
Yes.
All right. First of all, I'd like to welcome Natalie Perry to the podcast today. We're going to be speaking about an interesting subject. It's usually something people don't want to talk about, but it's something you have to do something about. We're going to be speaking about diving into an area of estate planning that everyone needs to have information about. Regardless of your age or your wealth, you need to consider getting a will or a trust or both. And I have an expert in the field. It's what she's been practicing in law for at least 2 years. No, but I'm going to let her tell you how long she's been doing it. And I want to welcome Natalie to the podcast. So Natalie, would you do me a favor, say hi, and just give us a little bit of information about yourself and the organization that you're part of, the ACTEC, so people understand how I found you. Okay?
Oh, sure.
All right, great.
Yeah, so I'm Natalie Perry. I'm an estate planning attorney, and I practice out of Illinois and Florida. And I've been doing this for many years, let's say over 25. And you and I connected because you reached out to the American College of Trust and Estate Council, of which I am a member. And in fact, we call it ACTEC for short. ACTEC is a peer-nominated organization where your colleagues, not at your firm though, can nominate you for membership if they think you have a reputation for skilled practicing in the area of trust and estates. So that's how we met.
Okay, well, it's only possible now that they may kick you out after you speak to me. But other than that, we should be fine. All right, so let's get started and talk about the cornerstone of estate planning for many, the will. What is a will and what does it accomplish?
Yeah, so actually, I would say the cornerstone of estate planning more and more these days is a trust, a living trust. And the reason for that is because it helps avoid probate. And I know we're going to get into that, so I don't want to go out of order. But a will is a very important document because it says who gets what when you die. So the will, it allows you to direct the transfer of your assets from yourself to a variety of people, multiple people, charities, whatever your intention is.
Okay. And what happens if you die and you don't have a will?
If you don't have a will, the state that you live in will dictate where your assets go. And generally, it's something to the effect of to your spouse. If you don't have kids, if you do have kids, it's usually a percentage to your spouse and a percentage to your kids. And then if you don't have a spouse or kids, it's to your more extended family, like your blood relatives, your siblings, your parents.
So the state makes that determination for you instead of you making the determination yourself, which you probably would have consulted with your family about. And someone in your family should probably know about your will, correct?
Yes, that's very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think to your point, a lot of people, when they find out that their certain family members may get something from their estate, that's usually a pretty good incentive to want to update their estate plan.
Okay. There are different types of wills, and there are different ways to get a will created. Why don't you talk about the different kinds of wills and then the two sides of it, which is you could do it online or you could do it with an attorney. I know that that's what you're going to say, so we can start with that.
Sure.
I mean, I expect you to answer that in that direction. Go ahead. So tell me about the will itself and what happens if you try to do it yourself and you screw up and you do it in the wrong state, let's say. Not a good thing.
So there really aren't, I'd say, multiple types of wills, except that maybe some people use what's called a pour-over will, and that is when you're leaving assets to a trust. And in that case, it would be the trust that really says who gets what instead of the will. And then a will where there isn't a trust is more detailed, and that's going to contain all your specific beneficiary information. Okay. And on the planning aspect of it, so there are online services where you can do a will. Some of them are, kind of the robots are helping you, let's say. And those sometimes can work, but other times we find that the specific state requirements may not be met when a will is done through kind of an online provider. And I'm
Okay.
not here to tell you which one is good and which one is bad. I couldn't answer that anyway. But we have had situations come up where we get a will when someone died and we're trying to admit it to probate in the jurisdiction we're in, and the judge will reject it appropriately because the witness language is wrong, or doesn't have the right number of people, or it's missing a notary, or whatever the requirements may be in that particular state.
Right. So some of the things that are very important is we could talk about what you would do as an attorney, but if you did a will by yourself and you printed it out, you're going to need basically a notary to and witnesses to sign it. So you could go to your bank and do that. But the problem is that you don't have an expert looking at what you just did. So in
Yeah,
that
that's true
case,
too.
you want to speak to a lawyer. So
That's
let's
right.
go in that direction and talk about the other items that go into a will, because there's a living will and there's a decision if something happens to you. Bless you, and we'll drop that out. Don't worry about it.
Sorry. Okay.
6 minutes and 22 seconds sneeze. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Nobody will
So,
hear that, by the way,
yeah,
except you and me.
perfect.
Maybe.
Um, okay, you were asking me about, sorry, what goes in
I
the
was
will?
asking you about when you would see a will. Uh, they should have other things in there. Part of it is a living will. What are the different kinds of wills? In other words, there's a will
Oh
for.
yeah,
Explain
sure.
that to me.
Yeah, so a living will is not the same. So a will that says who gets what when you die is what we call a testamentary instrument, meaning it takes effect at death. But a living will is more of a living document, and that's why it says living will, because a living will, and those aren't really used as often as they were historically. Historically, a living will simply said, I have a terminal condition and I don't want to be kept alive artificially. But what more people use now is a healthcare power of attorney or an advance directive, depends on the state you live in, what they're called.
Hmm.
And that is more of a document that has the ability for you to name an agent to make decisions for you. So instead of a living will, which was a very limited document, it really just said if I have an incurable illness or terminal condition. And what does that even mean in today's medical world? Terminal might mean different things in different situations, and you could be in a coma but not terminal. So what they've shifted over to is more of this healthcare power of attorney. And that's what you're kind of referring to when you say living will, is more of a
Right.
document that would apply when you're alive as opposed to when you're deceased, and allows someone to help make medical decisions for you when you can't make them yourself.
Okay. I have actually someone who's going to be speaking about that also in this same season that you're in, who just specializes in that kind of thing. They're located in Florida, and he's very well known, so it should be fine. So let's just go on and talk about the difference between a will and a trust. So we spoke enough about a will, I think, correct?
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about what a trust does.
Yeah, so a trust is, some people call it a will substitute, but the main difference is that the trust becomes effective right when you sign it, whereas the will really doesn't have any effect until you die. So the trust is beneficial because it's a private document and never becomes a public record like a will does. It can also help in the event of disability, meaning it can be a smoother transition for the person who's going to manage your finances for you if you are ill or unable to manage your own finances. The trustee is able to step into your shoes and govern the assets that are owned by your trust. And we could touch on assets sort of towards the end. So a trust can function like a will, meaning it says during your lifetime, you are entitled to the money, you control where it goes. But then when you pass away, the trust says, now I want these three people or my children or my spouse to inherit my money. So the trust kind of allows us to account for multiple phases your lifetime, then your spouse's lifetime, and maybe even after that, trust for your children's lifetime, depending on your age and kind of what kind of planning you're doing.
And there an advantage to having a trust regarding probate, and what is probate?
Yeah, probate is the court supervised process of retitling assets after someone dies. So if I passed away and my house has got my name on it, my husband can't just forge my name. He needs legal authority to sign on my behalf. And that comes from either a trust that owns title to assets, or it comes from a court supervised proceeding called a probate.
Right. So if you have a will only, normally you would have to go through probate. Is that correct?
That's right. Most states have some small limits where if you're below those limits, I think in Florida it's $75,000. In Illinois it's $100,000. Generally, those don't apply to real estate. But if you're below that amount, the assets, I mean, then you may not need a probate. So there's kind of a small estate administration process. But generally, if you have a will, your assets will go through probate.
And how long does probate normally take?
That is going to vary greatly by state. Here in Illinois, it's fairly routine. I mean, a year to year and a half, 2 years. It kind of depends on what the assets are, what needs to be done. Are we wrapping up a business? Are we just selling a house? Maybe you rent it and we've just got some cash that we're going to distribute pretty quickly. But in most states, there's a creditor claims period. And here in Illinois, it's 6 months long. So we have to wait for that period to pass before we can distribute assets.
Okay. So one of the things I read about trusts is that they're much more complex to make because it's not like you have a checking account just in your name anymore. It's really a trust in your or something. I don't know how it goes, but explain that to our audience.
Yeah, if I created a trust, I would probably use my own name unless I was maybe a celebrity or there were privacy concerns that I had. So it might say the Natalie Perry Trust. And then if I have real estate, I can title my house into the Natalie Perry Trust, and I would be the trustee of that trust. And I control what happens to those assets as long as I'm alive and I'm not incapacitated. So you can title those assets in your trust name, and that is just the same as if I own them myself, as long as I'm alive. I think your point was if I have a checking account, do I have to now have my check say the Natalie Perry Trust? And generally, no, the bank might still put Natalie Perry on my checks. So
Okay.
it's just a way to really avoid probate.
And if you're married, uh, I didn't ask if you were married, but but if you're married, like I am, and you were going to have a trust, would the trust be in both names, you and your
Depends on
wife?
the state you live in.
Well, I'm in Florida and you're in Illinois. What about those two states?
Well, Florida does have a community property kind of option, let's say, but generally, if Illinois is a separate property state. So I would have a trust and my husband would have his own trust
Okay.
because the law doesn't treat us as owning property equally. But in some states like Arizona and Nevada, where there is community property mandated by law, then you might have a joint trust.
Okay. Now, if you move to a different state, do you have to change your trust?
It really depends on the state law. So sometimes we always tell our clients to consult with local counsel when they move, and they may have to update their powers of attorney, which are those state specific documents. And their will and trust may work in another state, but they would want to verify that.
Okay. Uh, could you explain what the differences are between a revocable living trust and an irrevocable trust?
Yes. So an irrevocable trust means a trust that you cannot change. So you're really giving away assets when you create an irrevocable trust. So if I set up a trust, maybe for my daughters, I could put property in there that I want them to have, and I don't want to have any interest in it any longer. It's really like giving away that property. And people use those for tax planning.
For tax planning. Okay. So this is the stuff that of stories that are made because if you create an irrevocable And like you said, you have daughters, and you turn them over to your daughters, but then your daughters pissed you off. I shouldn't say that, but if your daughters got mad at you, okay, and you said, you know what, the heck with them, I'm going to take this back. You can't take it back, or can you?
You can't take it back.
Okay, that's why it's irrevocable. So that's another point. Okay. And I guess there's a lot of wealthy people that have those kind of issues right now.
Right. If I was
Okay.
married, I could make my husband an additional beneficiary of that trust to maybe give me some ability to, get assets through him, but that would
Hmm.
only be through him. That would not be me. I would not have the ability to take back the property.
Okay. Now, when we talked about wills, you spoke about the fact that you may have a year or so before those assets can be liquidated, correct?
Yeah, it really depends kind of on the type
On
of asset, the
right.
situation.
Like if
Yeah.
it was real estate or something else, because if it was in probate, it might take up to a year. Is there an advantage to having a trust? Would that not happen if you have a trust?
It is generally quicker with a trust, but you still have that creditor claims period to be concerned about depending on your state law. And you may still just need time to sell a house or, convert stocks into cash depending on what the situation is, or liquidate a business or whatever the assets might be.
So it could be confusing, but the best thing to do is have a lawyer do it for you and explain it to you so that you can sleep at night.
We always recommend a lawyer.
I wonder why that would be.
Must be because I am a lawyer.
Right. I figured that one out.
But of course, I think we have a special skill set and helping clients through the process. This is not filling in names. This is talking about who gets what and under what circumstances. And what if your children are little, or what if your children have special issues for whatever reason, whether some disability or just a bad with money or all those things. And who's going to be in charge? What if you have three great kids? Should it be all three kids? Should it be one child? Those are kind of sticky conversations that the robots aren't as good at.
Right. Another question is, what are the fees involved in creating, like in, I'm not using your law firm as an example, but just in general, in creating a will versus a trust? And if you are managing would you be managing a trust for someone, or does somebody else do it?
You would manage your own trust.
But if I die,
Then someone else is managing it. And
and it
that
would it
person may
be
be entitled to get paid under law. That is
okay?
true.
So if you have, do the attorneys generally manage a trust, or does an individual, like a family member, manage the trust?
A lot of times it's a family member who's going to be the successor trustee and step
Right.
in to divide up the assets.
Okay. But the attorney could also do it, and you just are compensated at a
The
fee
attorney
on a
can do
fee
it.
basis.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. How are we doing so far? So far so good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. Where do our listeners find the right attorney, or a right attorney? Because I know there are a lot of attorneys out there.
There
So
are. Yeah.
if I were going online to try to find an attorney to do this, where should I look? Are there websites I should go to? Are there ratings, or are those things important?
Yeah. So ACTEC has the ability for people to search all the states, all the 50 states, and even a few countries, international attorneys. So that is a great place to start. Their website is www.actec.org.
Okay.
So if you go on there, you'd be able to find someone who was an ACTEC fellow who's highly skilled in trust and estates work. And I think that's a good place to start. Even if you find someone who isn't a fit for you, I think most fellows might help you or refer you to somebody else, or, give you another name or two that you could consult.
Okay. Would you make yourself a note to send me that link so that
Yes.
I could put it on our website for people, so
Yes.
that they can? So what you're doing is you're saying, basically they'll ask you, well, what state are you in? And then they're going to give you a list of attorneys. And then you could
Right.
speak to those attorneys, speak to an attorney on the phone, and they will tell you, yes, I can handle your case, or it's not complex, or it's very complex. Maybe I can't handle it.
Right.
And I would assume that they're going to be honest, and they would send you to somebody else who could do it for you. Or if they were a very big law firm and it was a small case, they would suggest somebody else to go to. Is that correct?
I would say that's accurate. Yes.
Okay. And your association is all people that were referred to joining the association, not by your own law firm. So hopefully it's you support each other's reputations, and that would be the reason to do
Right.
it.
And
Okay.
Ken, I'm also going to give you a link to their foundation because ACTEC has made a number of videos just for the general public. They're not complex. They're not geared for attorneys. They're geared for anybody looking into estate planning. And one of the videos is actually on like, how do I find an estate planning attorney or how do I choose one?
Right.
And there's some factors in there.
I
They have a
I
number
did
of
see some
videos
of
that
those
could be
video. I did
helpful.
see some of those videos on their
Okay.
website,
Yeah.
and I think it was Rebecca that directed me to you from
Yes.
the organization in Washington. As a matter of fact, I
Yeah.
do remember it was Rebecca. I don't remember her last name. Sorry, Rebecca.
Yes. Yeah.
But we became friends.
She's lovely. Yeah.
What about digital assets? Let's say people have uh, digital assets which didn't exist years ago.
Yeah, we have provisions in our trust and will forms, as well as our powers of attorney that address digital assets. And you do need special language to be able to access those digital accounts. There's special rules that are, some of them are federal, that address, access to those kinds of accounts. So
Mhm.
your attorney should make sure that they're including that kind of language.
Okay. And then also, uh, how do taxes factor into estate planning? Is that something you're involved in also?
It is. It is. So, what you and I've been talking about so far is more probate, which is titling and transferring assets through a court proceeding. But we really have not talked about tax planning. But you may know the federal law provides an exemption from estate tax for individuals that is $13,990,000 for 2024. Excuse me, 2025, and that is currently scheduled to be decreased, but Trump has this bill pending that may change that exemption. So we'll see what happens with that. I believe the proposed amount is $15 million per person.
Hmm. Well, I don't think I
And
have to
then,
worry about those numbers.
yeah, some states also have their own estate tax. Just a handful of states, or I think it's 13 states have
Yeah, well,
their own
Florida
estate tax.
doesn't. I don't think Florida
Florida
does.
doesn't. Right.
Right. But I don't know about Illinois. Does Illinois have tax?
Illinois has a estate tax threshold of $4 million.
Oh, so it also is based on a threshold. Okay.
It's a little different than the federal, but it's so it can apply.
Hmm. Anything else you want to tell me about what you do and what lawyers that do wills and trusts do, and why it's important to at least speak with them?
Well, I think it's a very personal discussion and personal decisions to be made. And speaking with someone who's got experience and helping you through the process of making those decisions can be very beneficial and can really streamline things after someone dies. And we also find that family harmony is greatly increased when things are spelled out clearly and correctly. And some people tell their children about it, some people don't tell their children about their plan. That's really an individual decision depending on, the family's comfort with it. But it can be nice to include your children or educate them a little bit on the process and what you've done to help when you aren't there, because it's a big life change to lose a parent, or a sibling or whatever. And having the planning done can really help just alleviate that aspect of it, let's say.
I understand. Okay. Do you have a nice story you can tell me about what you've done for the 20 some odd years you've been doing this?
Um,
You don't need to give me names.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there's so many. I mean,
You have a good
I
funny story? This is not a funny subject, but maybe you have a funny story for us.
oh, that's gonna take a minute on the afternoon. I don't. I think sometimes the happy stories can be when we're able to help them through the administration process after someone
Mhm.
dies. and help them understand what their parents wanted. Maybe we were involved in the planning process and we might be able to help them understand and make sure they get the assets that they were looking for from their share, if that's possible. Like I said, to my point, I guess, about maintaining family harmony,
Yes.
having a good result after, it's very difficult, I think, to lose a family member. Obviously, everyone's grief varies quite a bit, but it can be a difficult time. So I feel that having made a plan ahead of time really is a great part of the battle. And that often leads to a happier result.
Okay.
I don't know. That isn't,
You
that
don't,
isn't,
you don't
if I
have
think
fights
of
over the
one,
Thanksgiving dinner table then that way.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, more
Okay.
of my stories are gloomy. You don't want those.
Have you ever had a fight in your office?
A physical fight? No.
No, but just yelling back and forth.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll end
People,
that
names
part
are
there.
used, siblings fight. Yes.
Okay. So you can let me know if you want me to list. I'll list your name, but I won't list your law firm unless you tell me to on our website. If people
Okay.
want to contact you, and of course, send me the information for your organization, because that would be the organization we want to make sure people go to. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to end. I like to end with a quote or two. So I have two quotes for this subject. The first one is from Susie Orman, who's very well known, and her quote was, "Estate planning is an important and everlasting gift you can give to your family, and setting up a smooth inheritance isn't as hard as you might think." And then I would add to that, as long as you have an attorney.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second one is, I don't have the name of the person that did it, but it's a very good quote. If you don't have a will or a plan for your estate, then the government has one for you,
Yeah, that's
which is
true.
not what you want to do.
Right. Right.
And I want to thank you for being with us today. And I look forward to speaking to you again. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
All right. Thank you. And that concludes this episode of We Are Olds Get Over It. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found our conversation both insightful and entertaining. Remember, age is a journey, not a destination. So embrace the wrinkles, the forgetfulness, and the occasional tech frustrations with a good dose of get over it attitude. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep getting over it. Ken out.